So I don't know if we really even need to do roll call. So it's such a small group. Can I see Nicole and Justin? So it looks like we're good there. We have quorum.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone to Policy and Budget Subcommittee meeting. Today is July 21st. It is 11 o'clock. Hi, Patrice. We will go ahead and get started with welcome introductions and announcements. Again, my name is Nicole Green. I am the chair of Policy and Budget. Pass it over to
Justin Van Zerber, vice chair.
Yes, you are.
County resident.
And then introductions of staff.
And I'm Kimmy Estea with the ORJ.
I'm Garyana Youngblood, and I'm also with the ORJ.
Jill Ray with the Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson.
Welcome.
Patrice Guillory, ORJ.
Okay, thank you. Any announcements?
Oh, the only announcement, if I may
Mhm.
share, that ORJ and probation is hosting an open house event for our AB 109 partners and providers. It will be here in this room next Tuesday from 10 to 12. I think we included all CAB members in that invitation. So it's just an opportunity for a lot of our folks where we would typically meet over Zoom, our county representatives, as well as our community-based organizations. This now gives them opportunity to kind of revive that relationship in person. So we're really excited about it. Chief will be speaking, and then we'll also hear from our probation director, Ed Randall, and Yuri Segofian, who'll talk a little bit about, over the course of time, a lot of the initiatives that has been happening in the county between probation and various partners. So
Okay.
great networking opportunity. So I think a couple of CAB members have.
I'll be here.
So we'll be monitoring you so that we won't have to post notice. But other than that,
So can I come with my other hat? So
can't, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're good.
okay.
But anyway, just wanted to share that.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Any other announcements? Hearing none, okay. Going on to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. Additional public on there, Kimmy, right? Any comments on any item under jurisdiction?
Doesn't look like we have any.
So we can move right along to item number 3, which is the approval of our minutes from June 16th, Cabinet Policy and Budget Subcommittee meeting, which is attachment 1, pages 4 through 6. Go ahead and look through those.
I have a question. Is there a way to put like a couple details about this instead of just public comments received and then linking the YouTube link? Because I think like from, if I'm receiving a paper copy, obviously there's no way to access it. I should access it beforehand. But if someone were to review this right now in the meeting, they wouldn't have time to go through and listen to a YouTube link.
I hear what you're saying.
I know that's an added layer.
Yeah, what
But
we,
like maybe CAB takes the responsibility of doing that, like the CAB member of taking notes on the previous agenda and submitting it to you all. I don't know.
so you're asking about, at the very least, have a summary of discussion for
Yeah.
each item. We have done that in the past.
Does it just not add a lot of value?
I think it depends on what the item is.
Okay.
So like, for example, the presentation on HIP,
Uh-huh.
we can't simply detail everything that was
Said,
presented on,
yeah.
you know, but,
Right.
and then if folks wanted to, they could refer to the previous agenda to actually see then the full presentation.
Okay.
We have in the past done some really detailed synopsis of comments
Yeah.
and discussions. What we will find is that because we're trying to capture what was stated, there's more error than not. And so having to go back and make those corrections about how certain comments were stated, it can be a lot.
Gotcha.
So our intention, at least in recording the meetings, gives folks an opportunity to kind of get a gist of what the discussion was all about.
Got it.
The purpose of your record of action is essentially you all being able to affirm that this is what took place. And so anyone who may want an understanding of what was discussed then can watch the full video.
Got it.
But I'm happy to take any recommendations or feedback as to if you feel like this should be fleshed out a little bit more. But that's essentially why we kind of moved away from, we find ourselves creating more errors
Yeah.
than,
No, that institutional knowledge is.
yeah,
I would have never thought about that.
yeah.
Because you're then dictating what I say.
We're trying to
It's-
interpret.
Yeah.
And there's in some ways you can generalize.
Yeah.
And have a summary of what was stated, but then even in that, did we actually capture it? Did we capture the essence of what was stated adequately?
Right.
And, that's kind of hit and miss.
Motion to approve,
Sure, I will motion to approve.
and I will second. to approve. And we go to a vote.
All right, so if we're gonna vote, Nicole, I assume that's a yes.
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
All right, and so that's passed unanimously.
Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and go to our next agenda item, which is number 4, to debrief from our CAP presentation at the July General CAP meeting. I know we are bringing back the appointment for next CAP meeting, right? So I was going to suggest, I did have a meeting with H3. I had a meeting with Jamie last Friday, and then I have another meeting coming up next Tuesday with the other Jamie to discuss in more detail on some key points from an H3 standpoint. And I've already completed the call with behavioral health, which included Suzanne, as well as forensic mental health and AOD. So I have I have a bunch of notes. It's been exciting. Jamie Jeanette also gave me a PowerPoint for H3. That was the first time that I've actually ever seen it, and I didn't have a chance to actually try to. I was gonna ask you, I don't know if I want to include it in
What is
our agenda. It was a PowerPoint she gave me, or if I could just send it to you to give to Justin, because
Okay.
it's not something I want to put in the actual.
just something for him to review?
Yeah, and it's the first time I've ever seen it, and it talks about, it was a presentation she did that really goes into detail in reference to core, and there was a section in there that I can point out in the email to that really stood up. It was a map of how core functions, but I never seen it. It was like
Oh, okay.
form
Okay.
that I thought would be interesting for you to see. So I thought maybe the purpose of today was kind of talk about the feedback from that presentation, as well as our individual policies. Since we're waiting on employment, I figured maybe we want to we're gonna come back to the next CAP meeting, and then I wanted to be able to I even bring all my notes. I have like buckets of notes from all my calls. And I wanted to at least be able to summarize that and bring that back to you for some key points, because they gave they're really, so far from what I'm getting from the ones I've talked to, they're really in agreement with our recommendations around the housing aspect of it, the behavioral health aspect of it. The work groups, H3 is really interested in the work groups, as well as behavioral health, as well as they have a lot of ideas regarding pre-release. So I haven't had a chance to summarize all of that. And so I was thinking maybe we could bring it back to our next meeting after employment presents at the next CAP.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And then I didn't know your feedback, and then we don't about Lanita.
Right.
So do one of us have, she's gonna be able to come back, or do one of us have to take that?
Yeah, I need to, she and I have kind of been, missing each other.
Okay.
We need to talk about, which is actually, I feel like this item about discussing possible changes to subcommittee meeting schedule, because she and I have not had a chance to talk about her recent, changes in terms of her, work schedule. It's hard for me to gauge whether or not it will require a change in you guys' meeting schedule or if it's
Okay.
something else. Because it seems like some of her travel, so the situation is that Lindita Mims has a new work schedule that requires her to travel quite a bit throughout every month. And it may be that some of her travel dates are pre-planned. And if so, then we can kind of work around it. But that's the part that was still kind of uncertain at the moment. So anyway, once she and I have the opportunity to talk it through a little bit more, we can make some suggestions about how you guys work.
Okay, okay, so before I go to number 5, because I do need to make.
Oh, but it would be nice if it's okay if I can make the suggestion to at least hear your general thoughts on that on the last July meeting.
Yes, so I think the meeting was actually great. And then for me, I had already had a discussion with all of them, so I kind of
Yeah.
knew what they were going to bring to the table. So what's been exciting to me is from a behavioral health standpoint to really hear what their needs are that align with our recommendations for CAB, and just the excitement from behavioral health as a whole and H3 that we're including them in our conversations now. And to kind of figure out where those barriers are, for example, from behavioral health standpoint, even though, say AOP, even though they're already in cuts, is wider than just AB 109 and where their needs are, and they're really struggling around the housing area of it. And to know where, especially like forensic mental health, to know where those gaps are in their services, it was really exciting for me that everything actually aligns perfectly with our recommendation. So I have a lot of notes from them. So it was nice to honestly, I was expecting to hear more from I wanted to hear more from our members from CAB. So it wasn't just me and Justin making the ideas and the questions. So I really wanted to kind of get an idea from the rest of our members that I don't think I got, to kind of figure out how they felt about the recommendations, or how they feel about what they heard from our partners, but I don't think it was room for them to do so because it took up a lot of time. So that was one thing that I wanted to kind of hear, but I think it went great. What about you, Justin?
Yeah, I think it went great too. I think the behavioral health conversation was really eye-opening for me, and the interconnectedness of it all, right? Like talking about the individuals who are being released and don't have housing, but are also dealing with behavioral health issues, and how do we leverage these different departments together to support holistically. I thought was really awesome that they were willing to come together and have that conversation.
Right.
I think I felt challenged with the concept of this is one-time funding, and a lot of what I was hearing was about really long-term stability within these different departments. And it doesn't feel like these funds can necessarily be used that way. I mean, we could fund a position for a few years, but then what? And are we going to go then back to where we were 3 years ago? So really trying to be cognizant of balancing immediate needs with a sustainability focus.
Right.
So that way these funds are leveraged in a way that allows for growth within these departments.
What I took from it was, I agree with the challenge that you've seen. I heard a lot about pilots, and I was also presented with the same challenge. So where my focus ended up going to was about the different pilots that could probably be used for that one time, to see there's other programs out there to see if it'll actually work. And then for me, it's taking that information and then working with you to figure out, okay, we know that there's more, there needs to be a longer discussion and look for funding to be able to, these programs to continue.
Yeah,
So to help us when we're trying to figure out the budget for 2024 and 2025, where can we look at what's being allocated now and where that possibly could be changed to help them continue long term.
yeah.
So that's where I took the challenge and start thinking, okay, where can we, for example, they mentioned let me see if I wrote down. They mentioned quite a few pilots.
Uh-huh.
So my mind went to where, okay, just say, for example, if maybe the one-time funds were used to try out one of those pilots and they worked, where can we look inside of the budget for 2024 to continue that? If I'm saying it right. So that was the kind of notes that I took from that is there's a lot of talk around. There is more need for a continuation of funding. It can't just, that one-time funding just wouldn't work by just giving it to someone.
Yeah.
It's like a certain area. So how could we utilize those funds and maybe bring in different pilots with that work to kind of see where we
Yeah.
go? Oh, no, go ahead. I like notes.
Well, no, I'm just trying to be respectful because I'm not technically a member of CAB. But yeah, I think for me, I was just super excited about the turnout.
Yes.
And then to have, especially from behavioral health, you had all three chiefs essentially
Sure.
attend. I think it's a testament of how the willingness of the various departments to listen and hear from CAB and also their genuine interest to kind of work together to kind of figure out,
Yes.
we all can agree that these are the priority areas that really deserve some attention right now. And so how do we get to that point? I think we have not yet had a very public, robust conversation, and we saw that at that meeting around those specific areas, which is why I'm glad that employment is coming back, because of so much of the changes that we're all experiencing in the economy and how workforce has changed drastically. What does that then mean for when we're trying to put investments into employment?
Mhm.
What or I'll say it this way, it's the way in which we've been doing employment in this space now still relevant.
Right,
That's the best
right.
way to put it. I think a lot of it still is, but are there other innovations or other opportunities we should or possibilities that the county should be looking toward?
Yeah.
And so I was just super excited about that. And then Dante Blue from Rubicon, he says, I just came. I didn't. I thought someone called you. He says, no, I just showed up. Said, but I will put it on my calendar. I will come prepared. And yeah, it was actually perfect timing in all of this. But so that's just kind of my general feeling about what took place for that meeting. But to your point about how to best utilize these one-time funds to then, even though it's one time, keep in mind it's 15 million. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of one-time money. Right. So that said, but now spread across the 4 areas. And so I think it's a great idea to have the work groups. I would even go as far as to say maybe even having some sort of a planning consultant that would help just to distinguish how much is necessary in each of those areas that would yield us really significant outcomes. Because some money can go longer
Right.
if it's a gap filler versus something that would need to be resource heavy for a long period of time. For example, if some of these funds were to support the development of permanent supportive housing,
Right.
well, we know that one-time allocation is probably it will do something, but it probably won't sustain for the long haul. So having someone to help sort those pieces out, and then also building in, I think at the CCP meeting where this was brought up, there was conversations about building in resources for like data and evaluation.
Yeah.
So in the event that some of these funds are utilized for a pilot effort, if you have evaluation tied to it, then whatever comes out of that evaluation, if there's some positive results, then maybe that could be taken back to either going for other grants or coming back to the or seeking Measure X funding, whatever the case may be, to then find the sustainable resources there. I believe that there was some discussion about putting set aside some funds for sustainability planning purposes, understanding that this is good for now and you should think ahead
Right.
instead of, and not just focus on a one-time project,
Right.
especially if you feel it would be successful.
Correct.
There's also the thought of that came up quite a few times at the CCP meeting, using one-time dollars for the acquisition, so for capital, not capital improvements, but essentially acquisition of a building for the purposes of housing
Right.
Individuals, so that way it's the county's discretion and how to bring programming in there to support folks.
Right.
So I think there's a variety of ways to go about it, but there probably is a need for a process to help with the planning and the
Yes.
visioning.
Yeah.
That there could be some consensus built around the direction that should be, that we all should go in with these one-time dollars.
Right.
Jill, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on what Patrice was just saying. I was just in a meeting with Christy Saxton, and she was talking about she's in partnership with behavioral health right now because they have a whole bunch of one-time monies coming from the state. And they don't, she knows how to do one-time monies really well, and behavioral health isn't as savvy. So she's working with them. And I think that's an important thing to note, that she has great ideas on how to use one-time money to develop the best forms of housing. Behavioral health, I think, has been more in a scattered site idea versus, where Christy knows about acquiring small hotels. And so you're creating more housing. And then the other place I was today, the public defender was talking about the lack of mental health permanent supportive housing. There's lots of opportunities for those who have co-occurring like SUDs, but not necessarily for those who aren't struggling with SUDs. And so, there's a variety of areas, I think, that can be looked at. And like Patrice said, this is a large chunk of one-time money. So it's not necessarily just like all to be spent at once, but to creatively plan out how do you spend that down over time.
I definitely agree with you both, and Jill, you did hit the nail. And so it was information like that they gave me that
Yeah.
I have like a binder. So a lot of information that Christy gave me in H3 and behavioral health was around those parameters. And so I wanted to be able to kind of jot those down to have discussion in front, to be able to do exactly what you did. How do I take that information that was provided to us, and then what do we do with it when it comes in front of CCP? And how do we put it in that form that you just did in reference to using it? Like, they gave me so many different ideas and so much information, just like you said, a building, a hotel, for me to bring back and have a discussion with you.
Yeah.
To be prepared for that meeting with CCP. So it's
Yeah.
a lot of information that they gave me.
Yeah, I think the best way I would recommend for us to kind of narrow down what ideas should be looked at and move forward is also looking at population data. So if, for example, we had through H3 a sense of how many people that touches their system that actually are in the queue, so to speak, for permanent supportive housing, but have been also identified as having a justice history of justice system involvement. What's that number of folks that aren't being reached? So that way we can see what the need and or potential demand would be.
Okay,
And that then helps also with budgeting, whether or not we should expand in permanent supportive housing, right? For a justice population. That will give us at least a snapshot. Same thing with behavioral health.
Yeah.
How many people enter their system within a certain period of time that have co-occurring disorders? How many individuals within custody that have some sort of co-occurring diagnoses that you anticipate will be released into the community? So I think when we kind of get a picture of what the total need is, and then from there, that can help dictate what certain solutions we should be looking into. I know on the AB 109 side, in terms of housing prevention, provision, the current housing program, the way it's structured, really benefits you if you are really kind of a go-getter already.
Yeah.
You're looking to just get back on your feet.
right,
It stabilizes you and provides you with some employment opportunities. But even that is sort of limited because it's
Right.
only so many housing slots and they're usually pretty full up to a certain point. And it provides a bit of long-term housing as well. And I say long-term, like about a year or so.
right.
So, not long time. So then the folks who predominantly qualify would be those that are on AB 109 probation. So now we're looking at the tier system as well. So you have housing available for those who are AB 109 probation. Probation has a housing security fund in partnership with H3 that provides some housing resources for folks that are under general supervision. And numbers wise, just so you can kind of get a sense of what we're talking about, AB 109 might be somewhere in buckets of maybe 300, if that.
Right.
General suit, we're talking about in the thousands, so
Yeah.
we're like 3,000 or so individuals. So there's a housing security fund available to them. Now, the other folks that are on that tier system would be folks who are pre-trial. So these are individuals that are still awaiting final decision made on their case. They may be out in the community or they may be in custody. Most times they're out in the community. And they may not qualify for existing house, or they will have to wait in line as
Yeah.
everyone else through H3. You have individuals, court probation, same thing. We have parolees, so there are some state level resources for anyone that's on parole, but they're still eligible to receive some of our resources. And then you have those who are really low level offenses, that they are arrested, maybe held for a couple of days or site release kind of situation. And usually those folks are your chronically homeless,
Right.
mental ill individuals. Some of them, depending on the length of time that they've stayed in jail and the number of consecutive days, they are also eligible for AB 109 funded services. So when you consider those extra people, is there adequate housing available? And what are the doors in which they can enter to access that? So Public Defender's Office has their HIP project, which is really, really great in that they're providing housing on that one. They're touching a swath of people that, again, probably either would not be eligible for, or they don't have like a probation officer or a parole
Yeah.
agent that could refer them to a resource. They kind of have to go find it. And so having that element through their attorney's office or their public defender is really, really
Huge.
crucial.
Yeah.
So it's trying to figure out how to best who's the population, how are they kind of categorized, what are their needs, and then what are the most appropriate solutions? If we're specifically talking about housing, the most appropriate solutions for them. It's hard to do to figure out, but I think if we had a really skillful planner or whatever strategic person, I forget all the titles that some of these folks, consultant, if you will, that can kind of help map that out for us and probably also map out the resources that are available.
So I was just about to ask you that. Has anybody mapped that out? Because I just pictured the whole visual of what you just said. That was
Kind
just
of,
maps.
yeah, we kind of
With,
sort of,
With data.
yeah, we kind of, not with data though, but we kind of sort of done that with the sequential intercept mapping, and that was done as a result of the Step It Up initiative. And
Right.
it's really looking at folks with severe behavioral health challenges. At what point throughout the criminal justice continuum, where do they hit, and then what resources are available to them at that time? When I came on with ORJ, it almost feels like it's eons ago, but it's only been 2 years, y'all. But I want to say maybe within the first few months of me coming on, we did have a symposium looking at the juvenile justice and the adult side. And one of the breakout sessions, we tried to go through this exercise of updating that sequential intercept map. That's been some time though, and I think it probably warrants a much more thorough update. But that said, that is one sort of mapping that has been done in the past for sure, to look at all, but it definitely use more updates because there's been a lot since then that has happened, or resources that have become available.
Where can you get a copy of that?
I can provide that to you. Absolutely. I can provide that to you.
I have 2 questions.
Mhm.
One, well, first of all, that's super helpful.
Mhm.
I think like kind of laying it out and adding like a higher level view of what we heard from those departments is really helpful. So thank you for that insight.
Mhm.
One of the areas where I haven't heard a gap, and maybe it's because there isn't a gap, but when I think about sustainability, I think about building on pilots and then identifying those longer term funds or resources. And for me, I always go back to like, who's getting that funds and how are they getting them, right? So like development work, are we doing that at the county or the state or the feds? Has that been discussed across these departments, like gap in either staffing or internal ability to go after and research and understand where those funds are and how they can achieve them?
Yeah, I would say it depends by department. I could say for probation, once ORJ kind of joined for probation, we've somewhat so have been the unit here that has been looking a little bit more into various grant opportunities that are there. I think the other thing too is that you have certain departments that are trying to review some of their entitlement dollars that they may get from the state
Okay.
to ensure that they're utilizing those as effectively as possible. There may be changes to some of those funding allocations from the state and how they can utilize those resources that would be of benefit.
Yeah.
We do, now the county as a whole did go through a RFP process to have like a standing list of various grant writers
Okay.
that departments can pull from to help support going after some resources. So
Yeah.
that list has been established, and I want to say, can't recall who all is on there for the criminal justice agencies, but it's available to us.
But
And-
unfunded, right?
You said unfunded.
Unfunded. right? Like if,
For that grant writer's
Yeah.
time, yeah, I think
Like the
so. I
department
don't
would have
think we have, I don't think there's, I have to double check.
Okay.
I don't wanna speak out. of
because
my-
that might be like an approach as well to kind of layer some of these resources as they build on these pilots and evaluate a pilot. Okay, then what?
Yeah.
Right?
Now, you do
Okay.
have agencies like health services, obviously, much more robust.
Yeah.
They have, they can certainly crank out
Okay.
grants per their various units and divisions, and have been successful at that. And then we also have Measure X. So every just about every department had at least some allocation dedicated to a specific area or project or new set of programs and services that the county wanted to see them move forward on. So I would say that there is, I'll put it here for you.
Yeah.
So it's captured on video. There's no shortage of funding. But however, I mean, it's just not here right now, but it takes a matter of grading, funding
Yeah.
together, planning it, for the long haul. Even with these one-time allocations, like you could probably run a multi-year project
Definitely.
with some of this funding. So yeah, it may be one time, but one time over the course of what, maybe 3 or 4, could be even 5 years. And by that time, you should already be preparing. By your second or third year, you should already be preparing to go after grants or some sustainable funding source that will help either expand that work or at least sustain it over time.
Thank you. And then the second question would be around if we made a recommendation to bring someone in and do kind of a more formal assessment, who would be managing that person or entity? Would that fall within ORJ? Would that be managed by CCP or us?
It will probably, if you guys are bringing that to CCP to consider,
Yeah,
they will either among themselves, or it could happen a couple ways. Among themselves, they could determine which department could take the lead on that to then hire the consultant that will support that. And or CAO may make that determination, or chief as chair might decide she want ORJ to take that on. So it can go a couple of different ways, but they would discuss among themselves to figure out what's the best route.
okay. Because I'm also thinking like capacity within different departments. Oh,
And then
yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I would also just add that there's been quite a lot of work that's already been done in some of those divisions, identifying needs and gaps. And so given, their, they may already know, they already may say, we've got this need, we could fill this gap with this money versus, a consultant yet again determining where our needs are. Like I know behavioral health just went through a massive one when it comes to what different types of housing they need. And they have a whole report that they just did. So I think that, and braided funding is a specialty of health services for sure.
Yes. Okay, any other, I appreciate the feedback. I have a lot of,
So you're gonna summarize notes and bring it back to have another discussion here next month.
yes, so I will summarize my notes from behavioral health. The call I had with Christy, Jamie, Jeanette, and I have another one next week. You can get back to ones with the employment. And we just got to figure out about Lanita, because if not, then we need to make a mind doing that one. If Lanita hasn't done it,
Which
or
one?
it was Department of Rehabilitation. That was her assignment.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that was it or not.
Do you know if they're,
I don't know, yeah, but I can, when I speak with her about her schedule, I can ask her about that.
Okay.
If she wouldn't mind.
yeah, just drop me a note.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So we can come up with our summaries, and then that chart would be great to have that.
I'll send that.
You gave me a beautiful visual.
When are we trying to
I was
make
like, oh my God.
a recommendation to full cab and then to CCP.
So I know, when it comes to CCP, we're just waiting for the next meeting, so I don't know if it's a date for July.
Yeah, so there was, I just see some emails swing around, about, scheduling a meeting either late August, so we're already kind of in the end of, almost about July. So it's safe to say CCP probably won't happen in July, but either late August or just keep the September date.
Okay,
So either way, it would be late August, likely early September.
okay, so I guess it's keeping an eye to see if there's anything for September. But when it comes to CCP, it's just being prepared to go to that meeting so I can, from our standpoint,
Right.
in reference to our feedback that we received on allocations and how we, want to give our input.
Yeah. Do we need to bring that to full cab or you're doing that from?
I just do that at CCP. I don't have to bring it to full cap, right?
What the feedback on. I think maybe for the next full cab meeting, you could just give as part of your report out. Now, are you wanting to make formal recommendations? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I guess
I'm
he's
asking
asking
the process.
the
Oh,
process. So
okay.
the next CCP meeting is just us being ready to have our cap input, right, on how we would like for the allocations, the funds to be used when they're making their decision.
That's a possibility, because I don't know what's going to be on the agenda.
Okay. So I guess just be ready to talk if we.
Yeah, I don't know what's gonna be on the agenda yet. I do know that, I guess I believe when the one-time allocation was brought to the full board of supervisors, I believe Chair Joya stated that he wanted the final,
Implementation plan or.
yeah, in December.
Right.
So there's still a gap of time between now. So, but the time frame then between CAB discussing it with CCP,
Yeah.
CCP bringing it to, I don't know what that flow is going to be
Okay.
in term just yet. So, but all to say, I think any general thoughts you have of potential recommendations, feel free to share with full CAB at the next CAB meeting. So that way they're just at least kept abreast of what you guys are.
Are we attempting to make something more formal? A formal recommendation to CCP or is it more informal?
So, I just want to make sure, I believe we've already made our recommendations to CCP. My understanding what you're asking.
No, I think he's talking about for like the process for this one time,
Yeah.
the planning around the one-time allocation.
Like we're collecting all this information and feedback. Right?
Correct. To
And-
make give our input and yes, our formal recommendation of how, as from a CAB, we would like for the funds to be allocated.
Got
So
it.
just have that input. So yes, to your question.
So then that would have to be brought to full cab
Yeah.
for approval before we bring it to CCP though.
Yeah,
That's what I'm asking, Doug.
yeah,
Okay,
it would,
okay.
yeah, that will require probably a more robust CAB
We'll wanna read
conversation.
that, yeah.
Okay. Thinking about timing, then if we're coming back to our next meeting to kind of rehash and recap, that's when we would review our drafting. So we would review the recommendations that we've already provided to CCP and then based on the feedback, how to, change that a little bit. And so it would be, I'm thinking out loud, I'm looking at.
Oh, you're good.
It would be the August one, it would be the September that we would bring the full cap then? 'Cause
Possibly.
it wouldn't be ready by.
I mean, if you
Yeah,
can-
probably, yeah. I think you could at least in your report out, so when you do your report out for August, and in that you can, or if we have our agenda planning meeting coming up, we could talk about it there too.
Okay,
If you want a standalone agenda item for
okay,
the next CAB meeting, like following the employment discussion, because that's the only one, or in HIP,
okay, yep,
if you guys want to create space to talk about what could possibly be some formal recommendations
I think that'll
after
be
hearing
great.
everybody. Yeah.
Okay,
And then that way you'll have some discussion time about it. And then after that, if the full CAB then wants to punt it to policy and budget to develop that, then you guys could start working on actual formal
Yeah,
piece
okay,
to bring back to the September meeting,
okay,
September full CAB meeting.
because we would work on
Okay.
it in August.
right,
And then we would theoretically be able to vote on it in September.
Potentially, yes.
and allow us to share it with CCP in October.
Yeah. Oh, well, CCP may not meet in October,
Oh,
but they'll meet,
it'll be November.
it will be November budget workshop, which is actually not a bad deal. That's probably good timing,
Okay,
because usually every November, there's budget workshop to prepare for the next fiscal year.
right.
Okay.
And so if CCP decides to have not only the budget workshop discussion, but then also a discussion about next steps for the one-time allocation.
Yeah.
It's all budget related.
Right.
Right.
That might be a good time to do.
That would
But I'll-
give us another month too with CAB.
Mhm. Because you all also would have to discuss your own budget
Right.
requests for the
Right.
next year too. So.
Okay.
We're gonna keep you busy.
Yep. So my takeaway. Takeaway.
She said, answer that real quick. Yeah.
The takeaways is summary. I need to do a recap for the conversations that we have. Employment is coming back to the next CAB, and then at the agenda planning, I would like to add that as a separate item to discuss on full CAB about the recommendations for CCP access funds.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'm enjoying being busy. I really like this. Okay. Okay. I know how to go back and press replay if I don't remember. Okay. All right. Okay.
And then you want to ask for any public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any public comment about any of the discussion that we had? Sure about to move on. Seeing none?
Yeah,
Okay.
doesn't look like anything.
Okay, awesome. That was a great, that was a very good discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. So then the next one on our agenda is discuss the possible changes to our subcommittee meeting schedule, which Patrice pretty touched on a little bit as we went over item before. So we'll have to bring that back because there's more discussion that needs to be held with Lenita around her schedule. I do want to see if we can move our August 18th meeting to another date because I won't be able to attend that meeting.
so as of August 14th, I'm starting a new role with a new organization, and I don't really know what my schedule will be. It is predominantly remote, so I should have flexibility.
Okay.
But what would you recommend?
So I was thinking either the 11th or the 25th.
Let's do the 25th. Because I don't know that I will be able to attend that CAB board meeting on the 10th anyway. And I don't want to miss two. And then I was actually looking at the calendar while we were having this conversation for the next month in September. The CAB meeting is the day before our subcommittee meeting. Do we want to have both of those on the same week?
Doesn't not forget that we said this. Okay, I'm sorry, you said September.
14th is full CAB, and then 15th is full committee. I guess we could wait to change that until next month, but just kind of flagging it here.
I'm fine with moving it now.
I just don't know what my schedule will be like, so I don't want to make you move it twice.
But we can leave it.
Okay.
Because we gotta also wait to hear about Lenita. So what, but I'm right, as of right now, I pretty much try to leave my Fridays open anyway.
Okay.
So looking. The schedule. I don't have anything extra.
Okay.
So I'll just go ahead and just Even the 8th is open, so I'll just block it for now, so I remind myself not to put anything on
Well,
it.
just keep in mind too, that I mentioned either late August or early September. CCP and may meet, and those are usually Fridays.
September 8th would be the CCP that as it is currently scheduled. But we don't know for sure.
Okay,
Thank you, Joe.
I'll make a note.
So then if I'm hearing correctly, the recommendation is to move the August 18th to August 25th if Lanita is able to participate.
Correct.
Great. And then we'll make a change in September based on,
On your Lanita schedule.
great,
Okay, and I just blocked off my Fridays,
Okay.
just
awesome,
on the safe side.
cool.
And then I'll let you guys know as soon as I hear about the CCP meeting is gonna be late August, because the last Friday of the month is the 25th. So I have a feeling they're gonna just stick with September 8th, but just a heads up. So, but I made note that you want to move it to the 25th.
Okay.
Should anything come back differently about the CCP meeting, I'll let you guys know, and then we can you could either decide to keep your meeting that day and just schedule it for later in the day, or however you want to do it.
Okay, great. Going somewhere fun on the 18th,
The 8th is my birthday.
the 18th.
Oh,
Oh.
okay, happy early birthday.
That's right. Yeah, girl spa day.
Oh.
I found a hidden gem in Brentwood. I'm gonna go hide.
Okay,
There's a nice spa over there.
well, that's what they say.
Like
I
it.
found it in the winery and I love it.
Oh, hey, hey, good for you. I love a good spa day for a birthday.
Yeah, so I got gifted and now I'm hooked and now I'm addicted. So that is one more thing to my bills, right? Yes, that'd be
Worth it.
birthday. Yeah, it's worth it.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay, so any comment regarding agenda item number 5 from the public? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and move to agenda item number 6, which is to review the changes to our updated work. And that's on attachment 2, page 7 and 8 of the
Did we make any changes?
I was gonna ask you the same thing. I don't remember.
I can't recall
I think
what
what we,
discussion was, but I know you guys wanted to have it included to talk about it.
it was some, yeah, no, it was around thank you. It was around the second item under goal number 1, the second item in reference to collaborative programs and services. We changed the verbiage there.
Oh, right. Yeah, we changed some of the dates too.
Yes, so that one we added in the key action step number 2 to identify gaps in Cocoa County's criminal justice system. We added that bottom part under expected outcomes to report back to committee members information discussed and
Programs.
services. I thought we changed that. So the goal was not to just completely put it on Lanita or any of us to attend.
Right.
We can't. The goal was to go back and watch the video if needed and then bring back. You know what it was? We changed it. In relation to the survey, because you brought up a key point about the survey of us having to put feedback. Oh God, I forgot my whole little binder.
Well, I think what I had flagged was that programs and services was already working on
The survey, right?
and so we didn't have an opportunity to provide any input on that, which is
Right.
totally okay, 'cause it's a subcommittee. But it felt like this was designed for us to be more involved in that process.
Mm.
But I don't know that we necessarily need to be. I think is what I was.
And I believe we agreed on that, so our
Yeah.
goal was to make a change of not having to be a part of the survey discussion, but to
Mhm.
review it afterwards, which is,
What we're gonna do.
yeah, which is what we're gonna do. But I forgot the verbiage that we changed it to unexpected outcomes, because this little box was changed. And I haven't noticed, so I have to get our previous
Okay.
notes, but I know our discussion was exactly what you said, and then we changed the way. it was.
So you're saying this, the expected outcome column for the second item under goal 1 is, this language as it is here needs to be changed.
Yes. We're removing the part where subcommittee to ensure questions around equity and inclusion are included, because we were not part of that discussion, and felt going forward that we don't have to be part of it. We can review it afterwards.
Mhm. But then what would our outcome be? So,
I mean, we could just remove it altogether. That's what the main
identify
thing is.
gaps in Board policy statement. Or have stance on racial injustice.
But it's still important, right? In reference to the survey aspect.
Maybe it's just like review and discuss, they already submitted this though.
So the provider survey has already been submitted. So that one is supposed to come back to you guys,
Right.
the results of that. Either, I believe for the August meeting.
Okay.
So Christina will be presenting on that. But the in custody survey, now I can give you sort of a synopsis of how that's been going because I've been part of those conversations with programs and services. That one has not been sent out yet, but programs and services did approve, voted to approve the final questions, which I want to say the version in here that you have is next to the latest. I think made just another slight change recently. But anyway, so you can certainly, we'll be talking about that next. We can look at it and if just from that, if you have some feedback. I'm happy to
Because
take it, but
Is programs and services also making sure that there's a racial and gender justice lens to their approach? Like I don't understand why this is falling in our subcommittee.
So and then correct me if I'm wrong. So I know there's important to have a part in there regarding program and services, because the survey helps us determine our recommendations and right in our budget.
Mhm.
So the results
The
from
results, right? But like the crafting of it.
is right. I believe this needs to be either changed to what we actually need them for versus, and I'm not sure why it's written that way. I just
Okay.
kept it like that.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm really open to changing it based on how we're doing things if need be. Because they are already doing that.
I mean, I think this part was new in terms of ensuring that there's questions around equity and inclusion. As that I will say in the provider survey, which you'll look at in a minute, I don't think we asked really any questions around equity
Okay.
at all. But now the in custody that in and of itself is a survey of equity and inclusion, because CAP has never in the past surveyed folks that are surveyed the jail population.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, some of the questions there, we're trying to gather some demographic information, as well as a understanding of what their needs are, both while in custody and then as they prepare to be released.
Because it feels like this should be part of the program services work plan more
Right.
so than ours. There's no flow, right, of us having an opportunity to, like, our time is so condensed.
Right.
And so there's no workflow where programs and services could draft something, approve it, and then send it to the other subcommittees for review, to then bring it back, to then implement, to then collect data, to then like.
So I'll say
timeline is so long.
Well, I'll say previously it was, I think,
Oh, wow.
excuse me, I think the situation here is that our subcommittee is kind of small. So previously,
Yeah,
we've had someone that was part of our subcommittee and we were a little bit bigger. So they were able to actually go.
got it.
They're part of the survey,
Okay,
last year and the year before that. So that's probably why it's still.
yeah. So then do you want to leave it and just say that it
maybe just
isn't gonna
add
happen
that-
this year?
Because I mean, next year may be bigger.
Yeah.
May be part of the actual discussion. So I don't know if I feel okay with taking it completely out. I think that for this year, due to our size and not actually being a part of, we're okay with saying that we're doing this part, but actually we commit.
Mhm.
But it may be a bigger group next year that actually will have some input on it.
Okay. Thank you for the insight. That's all.
You bring some good points. Was it RJOB meeting? That date is,
To resume April 20th. Yeah, well, they did resume in April.
okay,
So I can give you an update on our job if you like.
okay,
So for the actually, so their next meeting is July 27th, next Thursday from 12:30 to 3:30. It will be at the County Administration Building down Escobar Street, but anyone's welcome to join via Zoom. So they did resume their meetings in August. None of the subcommittees, with the exception of CEF, which is the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee, has met. And the bulk of the conversation at this point has really been in response to the Antioch PD tech scandal and also the ongoing FBI and DA criminal investigation into Antioch PD and also, I believe, a few Pittsburgh officers as well. So their initial April meeting, they had a community dialogue to give space for community members and also our job members to sort of share or reflect given that news. And then there was some discussion about, okay, what is our job's role or what can our job do in light of this to raise the attention to, or at least some strategies that the county can endorse to help support disrupting this level of structural racism and also racial disparities that we're finding in local policing. From there, we had a special meeting in June where our job finalized a public statement denouncing, obviously, the acts and the actions of those officers, and then calling on county leadership to identify some strategies to disrupt that sort of pattern and culture. And they also received a presentation from the Center for Policing Equity. It's a national organization that looks into some of these issues across the country. They're currently working with the Public Defender's Office on a project that they have. And so they kind of share some highlights of various solutions that other jurisdictions have been seeking or engagement processes that they've been a part of that really is at holistically like a public safety design to get at the heart of some of these challenges. So their next quarterly meeting next Thursday, we'll be posting the agenda today, but they'll have some time to brief on the Truth Act forum that took place earlier this week, right? Yes, earlier this week. Telling you, time is just a fragment of my imagination. Never know where it is. But a debrief on the Truth Act forum, and then also the sheriff's oversight quarterly report for the second quarter that was done at the board meeting this week also. And then also our job will have a presentation at the August 7th PPC meeting wanted to talk about their public statement and some sort of special requests or next steps. And then also they'll be giving a annual update because they're due for that to PPC. That's going to happen at that August 7th meeting. So at next week's meeting, they're preparing for that. Yeah. There's also conversation that will be, or some time will be allotted to finish the conversation that was started around what's our job's role in terms of its oversight and authority, if any, on the implementation and execution of some of the recommendations that they're charged with steering. So that has come up for them as they're trying to figure out, well, how do you really make a lot of these recommendations happen and real? If really you can only go as far as to advise agencies to make some of these changes, they would have to take leadership in doing so. So that's just a quick snapshot of our job. It's picking up, though it was kind of late in the year. And then with what's happening out in the community, they've really been honing in on those pieces to figure out what ways can our job help support.
Okay. So I know that we put the responsibility on all of us to be able to join.
Patrice killed it though.
Yes, she did.
Thank you. These are long meetings. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Quarterly meetings are 3 hours long. The subcommittees, as I mentioned, they haven't been active yet. Though I anticipate for August, a lot of them will be resuming their meetings in light of everything. So, and then at the board meeting last Tuesday, when the sheriff gave its second quarter report, it illuminated some things for the board where there was a formal referral to the equity committee to talk a little bit more about data collection on a lot of this stuff, the emphasis on how these racial disparities that we see exist in our justice system is not just at the county level, but that it's imperative to look at it across the board, all the various law enforcement agencies, so various police departments. It was referenced many times that they wanted to work closely with our job. So we could anticipate with this momentum building that there will be a lot more work to come in this regard. Yeah. Good stuff though.
That's good.
Not great that the work has to be done, but great that it's happening.
That is happening.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a natural progression with now the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice coming online. You know, the hiring is happening now for those co-directors. And so it's how these unfortunate circumstances that take place, I think what it simply does is just shine the light on why the work that was already happening is important and needs to keep going and needs more momentum behind it and keep it, so it's a lot of work. It's just necessary work. So.
A lot of work, but I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think it's saying that I don't really change anything.
So are you guys okay? You want to leave it as is?
Yes.
Leave it.
Okay. Well, then I'm glad we didn't change it.
Yes. I mean, when in work today, we could just say that, like we said, we're going to review it and kind of go from there instead of doing the from there. Any public comment? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is to review the programs and services survey questions for future CAB recommendations.
So we wanted to at least start review it to start having conversations around what information, when this all comes back, what information you can glean from this that will help support forming recommendations if needed. I know typically in the past, CAB has a policy brief almost every year of a series of recommendations. But you all may want to decide whether or not you want to do that again this year, or if what is already being done in the works around the one-time allocations is sufficient. Or even a look back of the recommendations you've made in the last 2 years, where, has there been progression on those items? Or if not, are those things you want to continue to carry forward?
So you made a good point in reference to already the AB 109 access funds already in place. Is that good enough? Or looking at the recommendations already put in place, the progress. Those are 2 points that I made. I was going to ask about that. So in my mind, when I wanted to look at the survey question for one was exactly what you said, looking at here to see based on the results, how that can help us either change or tailor what we already have. And I was thinking from a subcommittee standpoint, we'll look at what are those recommendations already in place, kind of like what Patrice said, is there progress on them? And then with this new light on this access funds, do we want to change the wording on it, or is it hitting the points that we're trying to make already? Because those recommendations have been in place. Those are the ones that we've been focusing on for the past couple of years. So now with this new information that we have, we want to come and take a look at it and maybe adjust it a little bit. Is the recommendations for the access funds, we want to add some in there because there are some that are not included, such as like work plan or the pre-release. So that's kind of like what I took from it in reference to us working together and looking at those recommendations. Is there some changes or add-ons? And if we do decide to do that, do we then bring that to full CAB? If we do make changes to the recommendations, how does that flow?
So if you're wanting to look at the survey results and try to think this all the way through, because there's a lot of information. You only have so much time. So one way you can go about it is, as I mentioned, you could do a look back on the recommendations you've had in the past and determine if what you have that's currently moving forward, which were like 4 out of the 6 that are going to essentially be areas that will be funded with one-time funds, if that's sufficient, and really your recommendation going forward is really just on the process, right? How they're going to plan around the allocation for each of these areas. So like you said, the work groups, the whatever else you wanted to add to that. So it's really a recommendation for process rather than a policy recommendation.
Okay.
There you go. So that's one thing. You could also,
And if we keep going, we can.
you could also, the
add a
others,
recommendation for that.
say that again?
You can add a recommendation for that to our recommendations for process.
Add a recommendation.
What did you just say?
I said, so you're making a recommendation for as to the what the process should
Right.
be
Okay.
for the allocation of those one-time funds across those 4
Okay.
priority areas, which are essentially your 4
Right.
recommendations, or 4 out of the 6 recommendations you guys have had in the
Okay.
So there's that. And then you can also take just a look back at your policy recommendations and assess to see what progress has been made on these. Well, 4.
Right.
There's some progress that has been made to some degree, but any other outstanding items, is there a need to move those forward, or maybe they're done, or what I mean?
Okay.
Like maybe the central focus of CAB should just simply be on providing feedback to CCP on what the process should be for these one-time funds across
Okay.
those 4 areas, right? So that's one opportunity. Now you might also say, well, wait, we want to hear back from the CAB survey as well as the in-custody survey. Is there anything we may have missed?
Okay.
And then do you want to act on that this year to plan for next year? Or is it something that you may say, okay, now that we know these are the results, maybe these are areas that we may have missed, let's plan to include that in our work plan for the foreseeable future, because you got all this other stuff going down. You know, so I think those are a couple of ways you can go about it. And then you can always share back with CAB. You've already determined that you want to eventually potentially be the holder of putting the formal recommendations together in terms of the process.
Right.
And then separately, you could also share it back with CAB after you guys have seen some of the survey results, what your thoughts are in terms of any areas that have been lifted up that you feel needs some work done around it in terms of should there be funding there, should there be a program there, or whatever the case may be. So hopefully I offer more clarity than confusion.
No, you gave me clarity. I guess my question will be then, when do you want to make that decision? I appreciate you being here because you gave me 3 points. You actually cleared up my confusion.
Okay, good.
Because I had the same question he did. Okay, the steps and the next, our next move
Yeah.
in reference to what we were doing. And there's 2 areas that we've been focusing on, which is the excess funds. And then also I kept in mind, I have to also look at the recommendations. So
Yeah.
those options actually, we just got to figure out which ones we want to kind of go with. So do you want to have further discussion around that, or?
Sure.
I mean, it cleared a lot for me. I really like my opinion in reference to, so going back to the part of the point that you just made in reference to the survey and the in-custody survey and the results from that. Since we're doing a lot of work already around the excess funds and our focus on our 4 main recommendations even from the previous year, whatever feedback we got from that, I would want to, review for any gaps, but then add that onto our next one. Since we already have focus on this. How does that sound?
Next one what?
The next,
Round of
round of,
recommendations
that will
for the
be-
future.
so that will be 20.
Now, the other piece too, not to add more stuff to the gumbo pot, but
Good gumbo.
Very good gumbo.
you do have an area of pre-release, pre-release engagement, right?
Right.
That will be supported through these one-time funds. I think when this survey comes back, the in-custody.
The in-custody one.
That would really, I think, could potentially really help shape what, really all 4, but in particular, the pre-release engagement
Right.
priority area. So there may be some additional qualifiers you want CCP to consider in those respective areas, or how certain things should be designed, or it should include, but like, let's say for pre-release engagement, that if a good number of folks that responded to this survey said transportation is the hardest piece upon release. Well, you guys did have a suggestion about maybe a core team or something
Right.
to pick people up when they're being released. So you may go back and say, we want to see a spending plan for pre-release engagement services, and it must incorporate transportation as well, some form of transportation. I'm just using that. I'm just them. But all to say that you might glean more information from the in-custody survey that will help really shape and round out, or at least provide some additional qualifiers to those priority areas, because then you'll be hearing directly from the folks that are inside.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
No. I was just, so I've just gotten a lot of information recently on the whole in custody services, and LaVonna Martin is working on that because Cal AIM is going to be funding a bunch of that, and they're also doing surveys as a result of the Cal AIM work. So I think it's really important to have a conversation with LaVonna to kind of see where she sees gaps given Cal-Aim, and there is discussions of that core team. And that's something to be talked to with Lavana as she's laying out sort of the map in determining. So I think that's an important conversation to have when you're talking about in custody reentry connections.
Yeah, we've had email exchanges between myself, Lavonna, and RDA, who they're in contract with to kind of map to do some of the survey collection work. They actually want to partner because they know about CAB's survey, and we're going to incorporate some of CAB's some of the survey questions here into their focus groups. So we're still coordinating to a degree, but the initial work that they were doing really sounded like it was more or less connections that were that needed to be in place to sustain any health service provision that was happening from in custody to out. And so we haven't yet gotten to the conversations around connection to then housing and then or employment, those other elements as well. So, but yeah, there's been some communication there in that regard.
So I do know just based on knowing what our main recommendations are and our recommendations for the access funds, with addition to the pre-release, there is going to be, I foresee us making some changes to verbiage to our recommendations to fill in those key points. I think the results from the surveys, especially that in custody, and thank you for bringing it up, will actually help. Because if you look at the way they're written right now, yes, they do focus on those areas, housing, employment, and behavioral health, but they don't really ask the changes or how we broke out the recommendations for the excess funds. So I foresee us kind of having that discussion and kind of maybe adjusting the tad bit, especially from the survey results.
Yeah.
So I guess, I know you said August, we'll have these standard results back, but do they have an idea when the in custody survey maybe?
So I'm actually going to be providing an update to programs and services. I did speak with Jody Sickaneder, who will be a huge help in getting the surveys out. We did map out a plan for the first week, I believe it's the first week of August. My notes, I think I put it in another tablet. Anyway, I believe it's the first week of August. These surveys will go out to all the modules in all 3 facilities. And then it'll be just giving them about a week of a timeline. And we should receive those paper copies back. And then we internally will have to manually input that information into electronic form. And then from there, be able to code and do some analysis on that. So the month of, so potentially September timeframe, September and or early October at the latest, back with some results.
Okay, so that gave us August to kind of recap all of our conversations, and then around September, October, have the results from the survey to then review our recommendations and adjust based on the access funds or the awesome points that she gave us, or based on and make some adjustments on that. And I'm thinking out loud, so that's what I'm seeing as a timeline.
But then we need to provide that to full CAB in October.
Right.
Ahead of CCP in November. That's just tight.
It is.
Is there any way in the future to prioritize getting surveys out earlier in the fiscal year?
So for the provider survey, we're pretty on schedule for that, so that you all will have time to formulate your recommendations. Because this is the first time CAB is doing an in-custody survey, really didn't have a set timeline on it. Nor was there an idea, I would say, of how to, what we would do with this information. It was more or less like we should just
Do this.
cap
Yeah.
or do it and hear from the folks inside. What are
Okay.
what are they seeing? And I think this is also on the tail end of some of the
Right.
conversations you guys have had as a full body about creating space for folks to share
Yeah.
their lived experiences
Mhm.
are. But I'm making the connection point about all of your priority
Yeah.
areas. So,
Right.
you know, it certainly in the future, we can do.
Trying to align them more.
Yeah, and create and establish a timeline.
Yeah.
That you can get your information back sooner, so you know what to do with that,
Yeah,
and plan.
because we're gonna build those recommendations and then have to revisit this data and make
Correct.
modification.
Correct.
Yeah,
So,
because like, what if we see something in the survey that is like completely different than what we're hearing from these departments, right? Like that.
so how about we focus on those our current 4 recommendations and what we're looking at in reference to the access fund,
Uh-huh.
those additions for the pre-release, as well as the work groups, like
Yeah.
you said. And then we can look at that survey just to kind of,
Mhm.
you know, see if there's some key points that we missed. I mean, if there's enough time.
Yeah, I mean, it is
You know,
what
and the
it
other,
is.
yeah, and the other piece too is though, you know, we could certainly, it's always great to have these conversations at the you know, public meeting level.
Mhm.
But if it's too tight of a time and you still want like CCP members to be aware of maybe some additional thoughts you guys have, always send that to the CAO's office to be sure that all
Got it.
members get access to that. And then, you know, whenever they have their next meeting or what have you,
Yeah.
or
Okay.
the next decision point can be informed by these additional things that.
Okay.
And it's very likely to, look, just as we did with the CAP provider survey in the past, we do a presentation before the full CAP. We also do a full presentation for CCP. I'm
Right.
sure we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So with the in custody survey, I'm sure that they would love to hear and see the results of those surveys too. So it will be in the public domain enough where.
Even if it's not in our recommendation,
Mhm.
data and information will be shared.
Mhm.
Okay, that's helpful.
So, I mean, what we can do next month, since we bring back our summary, we can review our recommendations as well and start getting a look at it.
Yeah,
You know, we'll have our summaries right in front of us.
that's great.
Kind of because time is ticking, it's kind of
Okay.
kind of flying past, so we can definitely do that and start getting ahead of it. 'Cause I think we have enough information to start looking at it and making some adjustments just based
Yeah.
on what we've collected so far.
And we'll have the provider survey data. by
Correct.
then.
So we'll be able to kind of do
should all-
something versus waiting, so we can start now.
Cool.
Because you're right, October, November, that's going to come really quick.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, did you see anything in reference to the questions that you wanted?
No,
to
the only
ask?
question I had was if this was shared, so. One of the big not epiphanies, but. One of the big topics that I kept hearing in the conversation last week was around. Like specific eligibility for different populations of people. And these questions. In the intake or the in custody survey are really broad. And I just was curious, maybe in the next iteration, if we could pass this by those departments if it already wasn't, so they could give feedback on what type of next level detail into these would be helpful in differentiating those populations.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that would be my only, but this is fantastic. Like, I think we'll get really great data from this. But I think when we were talking about like the number of people who are eligible for this type of service versus like you were delineating these different pots of people.
Mhm.
How do we ensure that the data that we're collecting and sharing reflects those specific pots of people as well?
Mhm.
Okay.
But you also don't want to overburden people with like these surveys. So
Yeah.
finding that balance.
Yeah, we'll have to, we've already been asked to cut this down to Page.
A
back in-
page?
back in front. Well,
A
this is pulled from what's printed here before you from the electronic. form.
Okay,
So.
you can
you
format it.
can- Yeah, format it differently in a Word doc. But yeah, no.
All right,
Do you have anything?
no, I mean, I just went there and circled some key
Yeah,
questions that, no.
So you can tell by the questions, what, you can kind of assume what type of information will be given out
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
folks.
this would be awesome. Yeah. Who took the lead on this?
This was program and services.
really
I
cool.
can't, I cannot recall where it originated into the meet. That's all I remember.
Okay,
And then they just kind of took it from there, and they really spent an enormous amount of time. I gotta give them a lot of credit for really doing a lot of wordsmithing and ensuring that the language is that whoever's filling it out can receive it well, that programs and services can get the information that they need, and that it's also not too cumbersome for the person
Yeah.
that's filling it out. So,
is it gonna be available in other languages as well?
no, great question. We can look into doing that.
Okay.
Look into at least having it translated for Spanish.
Yeah,
But no, we hadn't moved it. I can't.
because we're gonna get different data sets from those groups of
very
people
true.
as well.
Any other additional questions?
I got a lot.
Went over a little bit.
No, yeah, sorry.
Any public comment?
I would just add in, because we're facing this with our Spanish speaking population, getting them connected to services and finding out that they don't actually read or write even in their own native language. So some consideration on how you handle that population of people who actually do not know how to read or write in any language. Because I don't know what the percentage of that is in custody.
Jill? Any other one? Okay, moving on to next steps. So our next steps is, again, to recap to employment that's coming back to full cap to do their presentation. Our next August meeting, we're going to both bring back our summaries of all these awesome conversations and feedback that
Yeah.
we received. And review our recommendations to start looking at the verbiage to see if we want to make changes based on the feedback that we received so far. And also our recommendations for the AB 109 access funds. Also that beautiful chart that Patrice has. I'll send over this H3 PowerPoint.
Cool.
You take a look because it was really eye-opening for me.
That's great.
And what did I miss? We'll talk about Lanita, hopefully the next one, and discuss if we're going to move our September meeting.
Great.
I think.
And you're gonna let me know if she set up the conversation with behavioral health.
Oh,
Awesome.
yes. And I believe that's I have based on my cute little notebook. Did I miss anything? You got anything if?
You said, just to clarify, you did say you want to look at the language of the current recommendations of the 4 priority areas of
Yes.
the excess fund?
Yes.
Okay, and then there was a second part to that, and then start discussing
So we're going to look at our current CAP recommendations,
all of them.
all of them.
Okay, gotcha.
With the focus on our recommendations for the AB 109 access funds to start making adjustments to the verbiage of it.
Okay, gotcha. So full cap recommendations and then the recommendations for the excess fund.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. And then if there's nothing in addition to that, then we can go on to number 9, which is to adjourn to our next policy and budget subcommittee meeting, which has been moved to August 25th. Well, yes, okay, August 25th.
Tentatively.
Tentatively.
Tentative. August 25th at 11 a.m. And with that being said, we are officially done, and happy Friday to everyone, and have a good day.
Thank
And
you.
happy birthday to your little boy.
Oh, yes, I keep forgetting that Isaiah's turning 18 tomorrow. Yeah, I took the rest of the day off. I'm gonna go run around with an 18-year-old. Yeah. That's my last baby, Patrice.
Oh. Yeah, not a baby anymore.
He's a